What's up, Ego Hackers? This is CS Joseph, and I decided to go live due to a pretty rough controversy within the CSJ community. And earlier this week, a very controversial Instagram post went out, and naturally, a lot of people got upset. Although it wasn't just posted to Instagram, it was posted also on Facebook and TikTok and most of our other socials. And it was ultimately a big blunder on our part, to release something like that because I watched it and I'm like, wow. I mean, if I had no idea what this community was about or even who C.S. Joseph was, I'd be like, that guy is a sexist, misogynistic prick, basically. So it was pretty embarrassing. It was insanely embarrassing, and I am embarrassed that such a post was put out, and ultimately it was unintentional and completely taken out of context. And as many of you are aware that, when situations like this actually happen, I like to go live and talk to the community, have a little bit of a forum about what happened and explain what happened, and then also provide clarification and answer potential questions. And I do actually have a huge host of questions that I'll be going over as part of the stream. That being said, for those of you who are angry and upset about the whole situation, I totally get it. I understand. I would be too if I was in your shoes. And for those of you who took the time to defend the community, to defend me throughout that, including people like Thomas Began, who is one name I would like to thank, also Robert Potts, Christian Serekia, and some others out there who have gone out of their way to try to provide additional clarification on my behalf as to what happened. I really appreciate you guys very much, and thank you. Thank you for doing the work when it comes to fighting the social media post or comment war that just kind of boof, exploded in everyone's face. So that was pretty interesting. But like I said, I totally get it because even I would have reacted that way because people are making comments like, "Oh, C.S. Joseph, he treats women like cars. They're just objects. He's just objectifying women." And I'm like, no, I'm not. Not in the way that the typical feminist would react, to that situation. But it's not like they would know any different because that 60-second post didn't exactly provide the entire context anyway, which is understandable, and that happens sometimes. And sometimes these posting blunders are just part of life, and you just kind of gotta move on, apologize, and explain to the community what actually happened. So that's what I'm going to do right now. So yeah, what happened? Anyway, we've been experimenting with a new type of social media approach. We've been taking like highlights from various pieces of content and cutting them in little pieces and adding subtitles and whatnot, because I found out recently that 70% of all videos watched on social media are watched without sound, and that kind of freaked me out. So I decided to, kind of expand that approach, and we did. We did expand it, and we did that. Although we are not so good at it yet, and a lot of the timestamps that we had collected are QA, people who check that out, which that also includes me, so I'm definitely to blame here. I'm not blaming other people. It's actually mostly my fault, let's be honest. The wrong thing was released and completely out of context, and then I end up reacting to my own video like, wow, that guy's a sexist pig. So clearly, definitely not the message that we're trying to convey to the community or ultimately the World Wide Web, etc. But, it happens. And so, anyway, I first would like to begin with an apology to those of you who have been offended by that post. I totally understand, and I would have been offended as well. I get it. I'm there. So yeah, there you have it. So opening up with that. But I would like to actually provide the context of that post and actually go in a little bit deeper in terms of what it really means and what should have been on that social media post, so that people actually understand where I'm coming from and what my actual position is, instead of just reacting immediately with overreactions, which I don't blame them, because there wasn't enough input or proper input, because people are, typically in general, they like to rush to judgment, which I can't blame them in this particular case, but we didn't exactly provide all of the information, right? So I will now provide the information. But the particular statement that people had problem with me saying in that post was that me saying that women are sex objects, basically. And it didn't actually talk about how women see men as success objects or any of the other side of the point, because if you look at the original video, that was added within the context. And obviously, we still have this problem with my super long form videos here on YouTube, because it's like, okay, yeah, do I really want to sit around and listen to Chase talk about random things for an hour and a half? Why can't I just figure it out? And very seldomly, people are not going to watch the whole thing. And then as a result of that, they're just going to rush to judgment, leave a dirty comment, move on. This is kind of typical, right? But at least they have the opportunity to watch the entire video. When it comes to social media, they don't have that opportunity. It's just 60 seconds of something taken out of context, which doesn't help at all. Doesn't help anybody. And again, is not what we're trying to convey. But I would like to go a little bit deeper in terms of clarifying what that post was intended to do, what it was supposed to do, instead of what it actually did, so that at least we can all be on the same page. And if anyone complains about it in the future, any audience member who cares can point them to this particular video, this particular stream, so that we can allay their concerns. If not, people are already rushing to judgment about me anyway, and they're not going to take the time to watch the entire video or the entire context to begin with. And they're just going to make their own judgment about me, being sexist anyway, because it sounds sexist, but that doesn't mean it actually is sexist. So, and besides, a messy demon, I'm not very good at making first impressions, as Jacob has said, here in the chat. But regardless, I need to do my due diligence and take full responsibility here, and that includes providing the proper clarification. So let's do that right now. So throughout season 31, there has been an overall theme, and that theme is that people need to stop judging each other based on what they say. Also, stop judging them based on their intentions, right? That doesn't really help anyway. Honestly, I think it's kind of more in the realm of God, or God the Creator, or whatever, a deity, or whatever you believe in, or transcendentalism. I don't know. You could be a Buddhist. I don't know. You could be a Muslim. I don't know. But some kind of higher power. You can maintain that it's that higher power is to judge humanity based on, a condition of what a person's heart or what their intentions are, etc. And the intention itself is actually the main issue. I think that would be important, right, to understand. So what's left for humanity is to judge each other based on each other's actions. The problem is that actions are not always so easy to see, because we have overt actions and we have covert actions. We have actions that we do consciously. We have actions that we take subconsciously, unconsciously, even the superego. You can even go even deeper to the actions that are related to animal instinct, like the fact that, sometimes you just have to sit on the toilet and relieve yourself. You know what I'm saying? So these kind of things happen. And it's really important to judge people by their actions, not necessarily their words and intentions, because that's what we as human beings can actually do. And I'd also say that this is especially important when it comes to relationships between men and women, or even women and women, like for lesbian relations. This probably goes double for lesbian relationships, because women, it's especially difficult to judge them by their words because you can't really take them at their word. So think about it in terms of like Pareto principle. And I'm not saying that women are liars either, but I've said this a million times, but Pareto principle, 8 out of 10 times you can take a man at his word. 8 out of 10 times you can't take a woman at her word. Regardless, though, it doesn't matter because at the end of the day, it's our responsibility to judge people based on their actions. For those of you that have issue with what I've just said right now about not being able to take women at their word, it's because they change their mind constantly. I mean, their hormones are different moment by moment. They have ups and downs throughout the day, throughout a 3-day cycle, a 1-week cycle, 2-week cycle, 4-week cycle, quarterly cycle, yearly cycle, and their life changes and their preferences change depending on what's going on in their life and their environment all the time. It's because they are the survival gender and the survival sex. They're the ones who have to adapt the most to ensure natural selection and ensure the health and longevity of our race. And that's really up to women. It's not really up to men because men biologically are the disposable sex. It's not really up to us. But that's why, because they have a tendency to change their mind, it's why you have to judge women by their actions more than their words. But regardless, it's still best to judge people by their actions anyway, even if they are a man, because they have that 2 out of 10 chance or that 1 out of 5 chance where they're not really going to, follow through with their word. So as a best practice, judge people by their actions. And that's what I'm doing when it comes to making statements like, women being sex objects and men being success objects. Sure, I'll admit that I'm quoting people like Myron Gaines who have made, that statement. And he's an African-American podcaster and has made some very good points. He's also an ENTP like me. So him and I share a lot of similar perspectives. Granted, that's true. It's a thing. But the thing is, though, is that to add some additional context to the whole sex objects versus success object things, if you're going to judge people by their actions, you could say it more like this. Men see women in general as sex objects through their actions, just like women see men in general as success objects through their actions. And it's through their actions you can actually see how, by and large, this is a biological behavior, actually, a psychological behavior, ultimately. It starts with biology, ends with psychology. Whether or not a man or woman is doing this consciously to the other gender isn't true. The thing is, though, within the Instagram post, it comes off as if I'm saying that, human beings are doing this consciously. And the reality of the situation is we're not doing it consciously. Not so much. I mean, okay, granted, there are some people out there who do it consciously. That's fine. But most people out there are not doing it consciously. And this is why you have people making the argument not all men are like that or not all women are like that. No problem. I can accept the null walt. But at the end of the day, it's done subconsciously or unconsciously. It's more covert instead of overt. And you can see this with their actions, right? And so how is it possible that men in general see women as sex objects with their actions, or women in general see men as success objects with their actions? How is that possible? Well, it's like I said, it's unconscious, it's subconscious. It could be spoken, unspoken. Just because you aren't actively thinking it does not mean you don't do it. Okay, you do it. You all do it. Every single person, audience, not audience, you all do this. It's a fact. Now, here's why. This observation, it's accurate due, for example, the following analogy. Men are to money as women are to makeup. Okay? So, here's another example. Men reject women more than women reject men. and they're not even necessarily conscious of it. Just like how a man can look at a woman and know within 3 to 5 seconds if he would want to have sex with her, or if she's somebody who is worthy of him to reproduce with. That happens in 3 to 5 seconds, and it's instant. And it's not exactly something that's conscious. It just happens. He instantly knows that. But that right there is an example, and that's even been proven in studies. That right there is an example of a man treating a woman like a sex object. Not overtly, not consciously, but that's what he's doing. And men in general, guess what, are typically more likely to give the attractive women or the aesthetically pleasing women more attention, more of their time, more of their desire than women who aren't. And that's a form of rejection. And this is how I can claim that men reject women more than men. Way more. And men just know within seconds. They instantly know within seconds. And that's their form, that's their aspect of natural selection that they psychologically, provide our race. Women sometimes, it could take them 4, 6 hours. I've heard 12 hours to decide if they want to be physically intimate with a man. It takes a lot longer because they want to get to know him. They need to see how successful he is and whether or not he's going to be able to provide, provisioning and parenting and protection, etc., for her potential offspring. Whether or not she's consciously aware of her wanting offspring or not, it doesn't matter. Here's another take at it. Women often don't want to be with a man who makes less money than them or a man who's shorter than them, etc. Women date up. And everyone knows that women date up. And because women date up, that's another example of how they are unconsciously or covertly treating men like success objects. That's a fact. That's a thing, okay? So anyway, just these small analogies, prove what I'm saying, that men in general treat women like sex objects with their actions. And women in general treat men like success objects with their actions. Why does a woman bother to look beautiful? It's so funny, and you listen to the feminists talk about, well, I just do it for myself. And I'm like, no, you don't. It's biologically pre-programmed in yourself to preen yourself and to make yourself look good, because you're biologically predisposed to feel bad about yourself if you don't. So for you to deny that means you're just denying biology. And that doesn't really help. That's not really useful. In fact, that's kind of ignorant if you think about it. So it's a thing. The point is that, I'm right. Whether or not you can accept it or not, when you look at people's actions, men in general treat women like sex objects. That's a fact. And women in general treat men like success objects. You can't get away from it. It's a fact. It is the truth. I'm sorry. Not sorry. That's a thing. And that was ultimately what the Instagram post was supposed to be conveying to people, but apparently some critical sentences were missed on that posting, and it turned into a foobar because it was really effed up beyond all repair. And, it turned into a controversial firestorm, which, is kind of normal for the CSJ community. Let's be honest. It's very normal. But yeah, that's a thing, and it sucks, and I'm sorry about that. So yeah, it wasn't the original intent, and I wanted to provide that clarification so you guys know that it was of the original intent. And besides, speaking of that, and speaking of the post in general, I think it's wise if we actually delete it. I didn't want to delete it right away because so many people were hurt, and I didn't want to take away their voice and cause them not to be heard. And it's also let's see. One second. One second. Hold on. Okay, I don't know why this is going working here. Let's see. Lost the camera. There we go. Anyway, I wanted people to have the chance to get their voice because so many people are angry. And it was also nice to see, which people within the community, were, willing to defend me and really care about the community and the overall message. And that was really fantastic too, to be able to have, that opportunity basically. And also to, provide some immediate clarification, from myself to a lot of the people that were upset within like the comments threads that went down, etc. So yeah. So that being said, we're going to delete that post basically right now. I think everyone's had a chance to chime in on it. If anyone else would like to chime in on it, please leave a comment below, for this video, and we'll be happy to address any of their concerns and put any additional clarification. It's funny because like I often get accused of deleting posts, and I don't. Like, if anything, I just ban people off the channel if they're just outright disrespectful. But if you're being respectful, I'm not going to delete your post or ban you. So just don't worry about like comment censorship. It's fine. Like, we've always had that policy with people. We've always told people about that policy ahead of time. So yeah. That's a thing. Now, with that being said, I do have some questions from the community that I will be addressing now. So let's actually go on into Facebook and read a post that was put up by Wendy Gates earlier today. I think she got a little frustrated. I'm not sure because we had to stop commenting on this specific post within the CSJ Facebook group, and that was because I was going to be making this video, etc. So I'm actually going to read her post to you, and then I'll be answering those questions directly right now. So, Wendy Gates, quote, "Saw this on Instagram, and this was my take, but correct me if I'm wrong because I don't want to make assumptions." That's very awesome perspective and very humble of her to do, and I really appreciate her patience. "Both men and women objectify the opposite sex. Women are sex objects and men are success objects." Yes, everyone objectifies everybody. And it just kind of bothers me how, like, people, especially in Western society, are not willing to admit how everyone is objectifying everybody. And it's not necessarily that they don't really have the choice when considering biology and psychology. They just do it anyway, etc. So yeah, I agree. The video labels women as sex objects, and they should be test driven so the man can determine if she's healthy enough to have and care for his children, which are his legacy. That's not entirely accurate to the intent of the post, but that is basically how the post comes off, so fair enough. Question 1. What does test drive mean? He needs to have sex with her first before buying the vehicle, aka committing to providing to her? Okay, well, the answer to that question is yes and no. It actually depends on certain situations. Do I recommend men commit to a woman? Yes, if she's a virgin or has less than 2 sexual partners and he intends to have children with her. In that scenario, then I would say yes, commit. If she's got more than 3 partners, well, statistically, she's more than likely to divorce him, and then his relationship equity or his investment to the relationship gets completely thrown out the window. 80% of all divorce in Western society, especially the United States of America, is actually initiated by women. So it's actually extremely risky to get married for men. And that's why I don't really advise them to get married. Although if they do want to get married anyway, I tell them, okay, well, if you do get divorced, you're going to lose half everything you own. You're looking at alimony, and you're also looking at child support, etc. And it'll be pretty vicious. And even sometimes, even if the woman doesn't want to sue you for child support, well, guess what? The state will sue you anyway, because this is basically, in effect, the state admitting that they don't trust women to make the right choice, because that's basically the state admitting what I said to earlier. You got to judge women by their actions and not necessarily take them by their word, etc. And that's literally a law that supports my position on that. So no, a man does not need to have sex with her first if she has an extremely low body count, and she's sexy and humble, which is ultimately the ideal woman, and she's more ideal with the less partners she has. And that's just kind of how men see it, due to like our evolutionary or our, we haven't been able to determine paternity for the longest time. We want to make sure that the children we're investing in are ours, basically, because most men don't want to be raising other women's children from other men, essentially. Because a woman fears being sexually assaulted, but a man fears being cuckolded, most of all, being cucked. So that's why. And then she goes on, he needs to have that sexual experience first to see what she's like before he makes any guarantee of provision, likely leaving the woman screwed over in more ways than one. Is that the mature masculine? No, he doesn't necessarily need to have that sexual experience first. However, if she's had a lot of partners, I would say so. I mean, because I don't really teach men to start committing to women and having, like this is in the men's group, committing to women and even having children until their late 30s anyway. And I tell men to ultimately have a roster of women with which they can get their sexual needs met, especially with post-childbearing age women who are single, which is extremely common nowadays. And that comes from Benjamin Franklin's treatise on how to get a mistress. It's also a sexual aspect of the matron archetype, according to Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette's work. And this is why I've had sexual relationships with women who are like 17 years older than me, 11 years older than me, 7 years older than me in certain situations. And it was specifically due to that, and to take advantage of the matron archetype's sexual energy and how that benefits a young man, etc. But in the meantime, if men are able to attract women of their own age or younger, to not really commit to a woman until their late 30s, and even then committing is dangerous, especially in Western society. In Middle Eastern society, it's not as dangerous, and in Eastern society, it is becoming dangerous. So there's very few places left on the earth where that's still a problem, etc. So. And Creeper Kingdom says in the audience chat, 1/3 of men on the birth certificate is not the father, according to paternity test statistics. That's pretty scary, and I didn't know that. Hopefully, I wonder if that's true. Excuse me if I'm wrong, but that comes off fuckboyish to me. I mean, yeah, I get that it comes off that way, but the thing is that, women don't really understand, how to manage their own value. And I have a video coming out tomorrow that where I actually it's dedicated to my daughter and some of the things that I would hope the mature feminine would teach women. And I go in very deep on this because men, we're born without value. We have to spend our lives creating value. We have no biological value, whereas women have all of the biological value when they're born. And then they have to work for the rest of their life to preserve their value. Women preserve their value, men have to create value for themselves, etc. So you got to look at it from that perspective. Physically appealing breasts don't outperform what's considered unappealing breasts in regards to breastfeeding. Okay, you can make that argument, but that's not technically true, actually, because there's a higher volume of production and healthier breasts, and also physically unappealing breasts are more likely to be breasts that end up creating breast cancer and actually becoming a burden to the man later due to the cost and the time and the heartache of that situation. So that's not exactly, entirely ideal, okay? Women need to be held accountable for taking care of themselves basically as soon as they have their first period. And that's when that tutelage that the mature feminine and the matrons are supposed to be conferring upon their fellow women, especially teaching them who is a high value man and who is not. And basically letting them know that, hey, if you're sexy, humble, and a virgin, you are the most ideal of the ideal woman out there. And you can have any man you want, preferably the highest value man, and you could probably even convince him to have a monogamous relationship with you, because society is turning into a poly society. The betas out there will end up having polyamory, and the alphas out there will end up having polygamy. And that's in our future. I'm telling you, that's like that will be normal within 2 to 5 years. Normal. It's mostly normal now. Just think about the polyamorous sexuality network out of Seattle and read some of those articles. It's kind of terrifying if you think about it. Okay. Can he not determine her health before having sex? Yes, a man can determine her health before having sex, yes. Isn't there a risk to a woman getting too high of a body count if a guy sleeps with her and pissed off, then making her a hoe and not wanted? Absolutely it is. And therefore, she would have to be willing to say no. That's the thing. But women don't say no, because the mature feminine is not there to hold women accountable and cause them to be motivated and incentivized to say no. That's the issue. That's the problem. And the mature feminine isn't doing that because the mature masculine isn't around doing the rite of passage, forcing men to put self above tribe. Because when they do that, they have higher expectations and higher standards of themselves and women in their life, which would then encourage the mature feminine to compensate, because the mature feminine is starting to realize that all of the women are getting rejected constantly. And because there's so many spinsters everywhere, oh crap, maybe we should do something about that. You know what I'm saying? So now I would like to talk about something, because most people, when I talk about this piece, would say, okay, Mr. C.S. Joseph, you're being a hypocrite. You teach men to have a roster of women before they commit to a woman, and you teach women to be as pure as possible. And I'm like, yes, that's exactly correct. That's exactly what I teach. Because at the end of the day, a woman reserves the right to change her mind. She also reserves the right to choose. And she can choose. And until women collectively are choosing to be more pure and choosing purity collectively, it's not really going to happen. And then, virtuously, they'll have to be virtuous in that regard. But if one woman gives herself away cheaply, that makes all of the other women ultimately cheap, because that one is giving herself away cheaply. And this is something that women really, really struggle with, that concept. It's so hard for them to accept. But, when you consider things like when you accept when you accept what's the term? When the mature masculines out there are having higher standards, it's all of a sudden the mature feminine is going to accept commitment, but expect commitment, but if they're not going to get commitment, because men are not going to commit to the impure women, basically, and it's going to realize that, and in one generation, it'll take one generation to self-correct, but it will correct as soon as men have that perspective. And then men aren't, going to have that, fuckboyish behavior that Wendy here is talking about, because they're not getting any without commitment. right? And that's the issue. That's ultimately what is required. So let's see here. And then number 2, if it's okay, even encouraged to test drive women as sex objects, that's not what I was trying to say. I'm not encouraging people to test drive. I'm literally saying why. So Wendy's like looking at the how. I'm trying to say why. Why do men care about sex? They care about sex because, like, when you're having sex, it's like, oh, I am bathing in your beauty. And your beauty basically determines, to me, biologically, psychologically, how healthy you are as a woman. Everything's got to be in working order in some capacity. Because if it's not in working order, then you shouldn't be the mother of my children. And and if I am desiring to have sex with you, and if I am having sex with you, then naturally that means you fit the bill. If I'm committed to you. If I'm not committed to you, then you don't fit the bill. Then you won't be a mother of my child, or at least shouldn't be, basically. And this is why I also encourage men to control the birth at all times, and to use condoms, and to not leave condoms behind, because some women out there impregnate themselves with used condoms in an effort to consolidate on men. Most people don't believe me, but the 2002 National Basketball Association announcement and court case says differently. So no, I'm not encouraging test driving, although I know the post comes off that way. Would the female equivalent Why Women Like Sex video shot by female CSJ say men are success objects? I need to know his income and his net worth before I can have children with him, so I can guarantee his financial health to determine if he's a good father. Technically, yes. It depends on the life phase of a woman. If she is 26 to 36, in that range, women prefer more beta provisioning than alpha traits. But if you're asking this question and your age is 18 to 26, not necessarily. So that's different. And then also that's also different 36 to 42. And then after that they get back on the hype train for wanting, to know that positive net worth, etc. Which reminds me of the time of this like extremely fat old archaeology professor marrying a 20-year-old student who was his student in his class, etc. They divorced many years later. But yeah, like he was one of those rich and powerful university guys, etc., and just basically proving my point, etc. Okay. Yeah, but financial health usually indicates the mindset of a man and could indicate that he is a good father, definitely. I mean, think about it. Like, if a man makes $350,000 a year or more, like what kind of mindset does he have compared to the man who makes $50,000 a year? And can you as a woman actually handle that man? It's funny because Kevin Samuels was asking that of his female audience members just this last week. And a lot of them didn't even have answers for him. If you're not watching Kevin Samuels, I highly recommend you watch Kevin Samuels, regardless of your gender. Please check that out. Okay. Is the other side of the coin right? No, the other side of the coin is not right, Wendy, because there is no such thing as gender equality. It's gender complementary. It's not equal, okay? It's not equal. A lot of people can't accept that, but why would you want to accept that? Kind of reminds me of like Ali Wong, the INTJ comedian woman. She's fantastic. I love her work. And Ali Wong goes in and she's like, gosh, when those feminists came in, like, girls, we had it good. Our job was having no job, but then the feminists came in and now we have to have a job. This sucks. Life sucks. And I was like, wow, that's something crazy to say at a comedy club. That's crazy. So, if one gender objectification is encouraged, then shouldn't the other also be true? Actually, all gender objectifications are encouraged. Everyone encourages it. Everybody. Women enable each other to encourage it. Men encourage each other all the time. Why else do you think men's health and women's health magazines even exist? Have you guys seen those magazines? Come on. Like, that's a thing. Why does pornography exist? And then by the same token, why do romance novels exist? That's just women's porn. You see what I'm saying? Like, there's so much more, okay? Pornography is instant gratification, for men because they're super fast at that. And then you have delayed gratification sexuality through the female pornography known as romance novels. It's the result is still the same. Gender objectification is encouraged by culture. Whether you're consciously aware of it or not, it doesn't matter. This is a thing. You can't get away from it. You can decide to not participate in it and protect yourself and make yourself more pure as a woman and hope your daughter is more pure, and then teach your daughter to be able to decide who a high-value man is, and tell your son to have standards for him having a high-value woman in his life, so that when he ends up having children, he doesn't end up abandoning the children because all of a sudden he had sex with and had a child with a low-value woman that he can't stand anymore. That's not appropriate, right? So that's how we fix our society, because the society is on fire because of fatherlessness. Fix fatherlessness, and then all of a sudden the criticism comes back in the home, and then all of a sudden we won't have an entitled generation anymore, and we'll be able to course correct our society. But of course, if we don't do that, we're going to lose our society anyway. And I go into more detail about this on tomorrow's episode that I'll be releasing about noon Pacific time or noon Eastern time, I think, where I'll be going into that because I'll be doing season 31, episode 7.5, basically as a follow-up to the last episode. So yeah, it's definitely a thing. Okay. All right. Cool. One second here. Good old Seraph. Seraph is in the house tonight. Seraph and I go way back. So yeah. All right, yeah. So anyway, in general, final points here. I apologize for the blunder of that post and that Instagram post. It was taken out of context. It was irresponsible of us to post that. I apologize to anyone offended. And if you would like to share your thoughts and feelings, please leave a comment below. That would be great. And then we'll definitely continue the discussion here. The posts have been deleted, so no worries. And I'll be happy to answer any questions. And I also provided clarification and proof stating that all men in general treat women like sex objects, even unconsciously. They don't all do it consciously. They even do it unconsciously. It doesn't matter. It's pretty covert. And guess what? All women treat men like success objects. They don't necessarily have to do it consciously or not, because their actions prove that they do. The actions of both genders prove objectification. And you can't get away from that. Y'all objectify each other. And that's a fact. Everyone does. Our race is a lot more shallow than you realize. But it's that shallowness that continues the health and safety and survival of our race. It's what natural selection is. And if your feelings are hurt as a result of that, you might be buying into too much affiliative narratives. Because think about it this way. The affiliative, or do the right thing, versus the pragmatic, do what works. The pragmatic is closer to natural selection than the affiliative. The affiliative is basically a buffer from natural selection, if you think about it. Not saying anyone is more superior than the other, but I'm showing you the consequences of these two different ideologies or worldviews, as it were. So, anyway, folks, thanks for watching. Thank you for your forgiveness. Thank you for continuing to be members of our community. And thank you for sharing your voice and your concerns as a result of that post going out. Again, I apologize to anyone and everyone that was offended, and those who may not yet be offended but will be offended in the future. And so yeah, awesome. With that being said, folks, I'll see you guys tonight, or at least tomorrow. Later.